This podcast contains potentially adult language, adult themes, definitely drinking, and possibly sexual context. Listener discretion is advised. This is Drinking with Authors Literary Briefs. I didn't even drink half of this, and I'm like not in great condition right now. I'm super proud. I'm an example of what not to be like. So I am your host, Erica Lance. My co-host today is
Vanessa Valiente,
who's going to introduce our guest because I am a shit show right now.
Our lovely author this evening is Wendy Dalrymple.
It's fucking a wicked name. Wicked name. There's a guy that I ran into named Pendergast, and I that name is fucking brilliant. I'm like, I want these names.
They do. They sound a little. They sound literary, don't they?
They sound super fancy. What the fuck?
You know what's interesting is there's actually, I believe, a priest in England that has my name. And she's super cool, and she's got a super big media presence, and so I'm sure she was a little baffled when I came on the scene, and now she Googles her name and sees a romance writer.
I think that's brilliant, and I think you should write a priest story. Look at what I just did right there. What I just did.
Okay.
You'll find this on YouTube, and I'll get hate mail. I enjoy that. Do you think priests ever write hate mail? This is maybe a pause moment.
No,
just like mail
on YouTube.
I think it would be more the congregation that would be like, blasphemy. What are you doing?
I will say,
I look forward to it. Okay, let's talk about what we're drinking, because we're supposed to do that before rapid fire questions, although that was a good one. I am drinking Old Smoky Tennessee Mango Habanero whiskey, and I've already had too much of it. Okay, Vanessa, what are you drinking?
Oh my God, that is amazing. Well, I was drinking the Dreaming Tree Crush, but that was the last bit and I drank it all. So I am switching over to my Christmas mug, which I know it's not Christmas, but I have lovely Chinese tea, and it's called like Lapsang Souchong. If I butchered that, I apologize. But it's
now
like,
we're gonna get hate mail from Chinese people.
Sorry, but I will tell you this: it's a fabulous Chinese black tea that has a smoky, woodsy taste. So there you go.
That's lame. Okay, Wendy, what are you drinking?
I'm drinking the rest of my Guinness, just a good old regular Guinness.
Good old Guinness. Do you do Irish car bombs?
I saw on one of your other episodes that someone did a very epic one. I wasn't even going to try. No, I think that my husband, who is a Scotch and aficionado, would have a minor heart attack if I mixed the two.
I think that's brilliant. Yeah, no, that was MR Noble. She surprised the crap out of us when she did that. That was
funny.
Yeah, that was very
really the bar really high. I'm waiting for someone to say I'm gonna do a sake bomb, which requires you to put your Japanese beer to chopsticks and some sake, and you slam the table, and then it drops, and then you chug it. So somebody out there, please do it. I will be very, very impressed.
Oh my God. Yeah, we need that. We need that in our lives. Okay, rapid fire questions that are actually supposed to be on this show and not sake bombs.
Let's see if we can do more than 2 of them this time, though, Eric.
I've actually gotten pretty good at this. I would like less negativity from my co-host. Why do I have you on the show? You're supposed to back me up. Okay, what is your favorite book of all time?
Kill a Mockingbird.
Love that book. Did you say that because I say that all the time?
No, I promise I was not stalking that. No, I was one of the weird kids in school that was like, yes, we're finally reading this book because I love the old black and white movie. So yeah, that's my favorite book of all time.
And why is it your favorite book?
Well, the South, my beer's kicking in. We've got, I think that the fact that Scout is such a strong character in it, you have the little girl as a main character that's just like, so she was just so powerful in it. And when I was reading that as a young girl, it was just, you didn't see that in a lot of, especially literature from that period. So I think that Scout, and then her relationship with her father, and obviously all of the underlying themes that are in the book that make it so important, and that's why it's still required reading today. And so, you know what, maybe it's a safe choice, but it's the one that always just naturally rolls off my tongue. So
Well, wait a minute. Did you read the sequel?
I did, to Set a Watchman, and I shouldn't have read it because I know that Harper didn't want it to be released, and I know that and just what it ended up being. But I couldn't help myself because I was such a fan of the first one.
Do you feel like it ruined anything enjoying reading the first one?
No, because I understood why she didn't want to have it released. And so sometimes you write stuff and you think, as a writer, you're like, okay, well, maybe we'll be a little provocative and we'll put a little different. Also, it was the evolution of Atticus's character into Set a Watchman is also probably realistic of some people. Some people change like that, and end up not being the person that you thought that they were. And so I think that it was, whether she wanted it released or not, it was an interesting piece of fiction.
Interesting commentary. Okay, well, you know what's coming up next. What is your least favorite book of all time?
I don't like to be negative about that kind of stuff.
It doesn't matter. You agreed and wanted to be on this podcast, and this is podcast question.
I didn't watch it. I did not prepare for that one. My least favorite book of all time. I'm trying to think of one that I might have DNF'd because it was just so bad. I don't know. Why don't you guys tell me your least favorite? Turn this interview around.
I already know what Erica's is going to be, right? Is it
50 Shades of fucking Grey?
Yeah, I knew it.
Which one?
I didn't even finish
50 Shades?
that pile of shit at all. I read 6 pages. That book can go fuck itself. It's terrible.
That one was a DNF for me, but I didn't finish it, so I can't say it's the worst of all time. But if that's your opinion, you're allowed to have it.
Plains of Passage was fucking terrible because that was like 20,000 pages about fucking grass that nobody gives a shit about. Ruined the series. I could keep going on this because I get so agitated by stuff. Like I actually was not a huge fan of Eclipse. Is it Eclipse?
Stephanie Meyer?
The one where fucking he leaves and then she's sitting being depressed.
No, that's New Moon. It's New Moon where she's sitting in her chair and it's months go by and
yeah. I will never shit talk Twilight because I was very pregnant with my second son and I couldn't drink, I couldn't get a tattoo, I couldn't go on roller coasters, I could read paranormal romance, and so Stephanie Meyer saved me during my second pregnancy and gave me something to do for a solid month. So I feel like
I've watched the Twilight movies more than every time I go visit my best friend. We watch all of them except for that one, which is the second one. We never watched that one because it's fucking terrible. And actually what's funny is my goddaughter, her daughter, for her birthday, which was in September, she said, all I want is Erica to come up and wear matching pajamas with me and watch the Twilight movies.
Aww.
So we got matching pajamas because, believe it or not, it can be nice. And we went up and I loved the movies. And I'm like, do you want to watch like all of them? And she's like, yeah. So we put on 2. And it was so funny because she's like 13 and she's sitting there and she's like, this movie is terrible. And I'm like, well, this is why we always skip it. But now we're here. Now we're enduring it. So I tease her all the time. I'm like, you better behave or we're watching Twilight 2 again. What about you? Oh my gosh, Vanessa. Wow. I've had way too much whiskey. It's bad.
You're supposed to support me. I am your co-host. I'm putting your words back in your face, just so you know.
You know, you are lucky
I heart you,
Missy.
I would say, and by the way, I'm looking that way because my bookshelf is in front of me. I'm gonna say, and I do own all 4 of this one particular series, and I will say the first one I enjoyed, and it just got worse, and I thought it was gonna be good, and it's the Hush Hush series by Becca Fitzpatrick. It's a YA series. It literally ended up being like starting out like a Twilight ripoff with angels, and it just I can't. It's been like years since I read that series, and I just remember the thing that made me upset was like I felt like these villains, like they turned characters into villains out of nowhere towards the end, and I feel like that's like one of the worst things you can do as a writer is you promise something or it's just not laid out the best way, and then at the end you're like, really? And I will say, I love Veronica Roth and the Divergent. I love the first two. I will say the third one, I wanted to fling it at the wall for, if you read it, you'll know why. I won't spoil it. I'm sure most people have read it, but the ending, I didn't like what happened to a particular character. So we'll just leave it at that. So those are the two that come to mind right now.
And again, our opinions, although I think there's a lot of people that agree with me on 50, our opinions are not that of every person in the world. And you can like whatever you want to like. And there's stuff that, I'm not a big fan of Western novels. I know that people that like Western novels like Louis L'Amour and stuff get so into those books. And I can't. Like, I just absolutely can't. So
what amazes me about 50 Shades is that apparently she wrote that on her BlackBerry on her commutes to work and the tube, like in London. And so perhaps the writing reflects that, but the fact that she was able to do that is amazing. So
it's true. And she actually, I talk about this a lot, she got a fan base going because this was oh my gosh, what was it? Fan fiction. She was writing fan fiction on like a blog type thing, like a website on her BlackBerry. And she decided to put it in a book and she got all these people to pre-order it. I mean, she did very well for herself. What upsets me is I know so many brilliant writers that should have that level of success from their books and they don't. And I can always acknowledge when somebody makes a crap ton of money and does a good job. Like in the 80s growing up, there was the Madonna Cyndi Lauper time period where they were both incredibly popular. And honestly, Cyndi Lauper has a way better voice than Madonna does by far, right? But she went farther. Madonna did. And it's because she knew how to do the publicity and the public relations and all that other stuff. Whether it's good PR or bad PR, she didn't care. But she went way farther because of that than Cyndi Lauper did with a better voice. And it's just a little annoying that, the foundation is not, this is good literature. The foundation is, this is appears to be a naughty book and then pisses off the entire BDSM community. But
I do want to throw out one more book. It came to mind, The Great Gatsby. Daisy Buchanan can shove it. Like, absolutely. The character at the end, I was like, oh my God, this horrible human being. I can't do that. That one in like Withering Heights. I was not into Withering Heights.
Somebody the other day said Withering Heights is amazing on audiobook. It was on the podcast. They were talking about it and they said the narrator brought to life the story that they hated Withering Heights.
And a good narrator will really do that.
Yeah,
so you might want to get the audiobook and give that a try.
I was in 10th grade when I read that, so it could also be angsty high schooler at the time that was just pissed off.
The time period, the writing of that time period is very difficult to read too. I recently revisited it and tried to read it, and I'm like, oh, this is just, it doesn't flow. It's not easy to read. It's not pleasant to read. Like when you sit down to read, you don't want to have to feel like you're in 11th grade English.
I didn't feel that way about Jane Eyre. I loved reading Jane Eyre. I had to read that my senior year in high school. Loved it. So there were some that I absolutely enjoyed, but I specifically remember that Withering Heights, and I hated The Awakening. I know it was like some feminist, like, woman in her time period breaking out of like wanting to be more, but she ends up killing herself at the end, and I was upset. I just, that book of Mice of Men, that one was tragic. I was upset. I can't. Those were the worst.
I must be a masochist though, because I used to think that I liked romance before I was really into writing romance, but I found out that what I really liked to read was tragedies. So it's like there's stories that had romantic elements in them, but they didn't have a happily ever after. So I do like those tragic stories. Like my husband teases me about it all the time. Just he's like, is this another one of those wrist cutter movies? And I was like, maybe, I don't know. So
Personally don't have a problem with there not being a happy ending, but for some reason those specific ones rubbed me the wrong way. Like, I love Game of Thrones and everyone dies, and I never get what I want, but those books are fantastic. But for some reason those specific books, it irked me, and I have one friend that hates Ayn Rand's books, and we would go to the bookstore, and I would go the opposite way because I was worried that we were going to get escorted out of the bookstore. She would take all the books that they had there of hers, and she would stick them in the true crime section because she's like, it's a crime that these books exist. And she would just stick them in there, and I'm like, oh my God, we're gonna get in so much trouble. But I've never read those, but yeah, I thought that was a funny story.
No, that is, and you probably would get in trouble. Okay, so what is your favorite, Wendy, what is your favorite book that's been made into a movie or a TV show?
Ooh.
I have to answer rapid fire, right?
Well, no, I'm supposed to give the questions rapid fire. You can do whatever you fucking want to. It's your podcast. You can do it.
Okay.
I refuse to answer that shit. Erica, fuck off. And I'd be good.
Can I have multiple favorites?
Sure.
So let me see. I don't know. I think I really enjoyed American Psycho, and I know that that's a weird choice.
It's starting to become scary, wholesome, sweet romance writer.
I know. I'm an anomaly. I liked some of the Stephen King adaptations, not all. The Shining was very good.
Wait, Shining, the
Which
original
version? Because there's like 40 versions.
or
the original, the one with Jack Nicholson. Let me see. These are gonna be horror. They're just gonna be horror. That's all that there is to it. I'm actually very excited about a couple that are coming out. So last year I read Mexican Gothic, and I read Southern Gothic Guide to Slaying Vampires, and those are in production, and I can't wait to see those. So a lot of the ones that I would answer have not been made yet.
Very cool. Vanessa, what about you?
Ooh. Oh gosh.
She's
She's
pausing.
now my brain is like, now I can't remember any book series. Well, I will say I'm gonna go with good oldies like Harry Potter. All of those were fantastic. I'm trying to think. You know what? I love the Shadowhunter TV series, which were based off of Cassandra Clare's Immortal Instrument series. They originally were movies, but then they only did the first one, and then they decided to make it into a TV show. So that ended up being fantastic. And Bridgerton, if we're talking about something more recent on Netflix, yes. And now I'm going to read all of those books. So I'm excited.
Very cool. I think you.
Yes.
The book is actually fucking phenomenal. Like I watched the series before listening. I actually listened to both the books, and the guy that reads both the books is amazing. And both of those books, I will, massive spoiler alert. The first series is very close to the book. The second series is not. It's got some of the same characters, but it definitely deviated. But I think they did a very good job with those, and they're nice and sufficiently creepy. And they're filming season 3.
Nice.
Of You right now, which is, it's really funny. His reaction to people being fans and falling in love with this character. And he's like, it is a serial killer. That is crazy. Why are you doing this?
Yeah, I heard about that.
Wendy, what is your favorite character that you've written?
My favorite character. Well, that's gonna have to be Katya from the Shield Maiden's Secret. So Katya is a young Nordic woman who is escaping a arranged marriage, and she wants to travel. She wants to see other places. So the way for her to do that is to is to portray a man, kind of Mulanish, a little bit of a Mulanish vibe. So she poses as a young boy to make her way onto a Viking ship and join the raiding parties. And so Katja's was one of my favorite to write.
That's very awesome. What is your favorite character in a book that you didn't write?
Well, we talked about this before with To Kill a Mockingbird. I really liked Scout. I liked how, and she was so spunky and just knew what she wanted and had no fear. And so I think she's one of my favorites of all time.
Anyone else though? Let's throw out a different name.
Different name. Come back to me. I'll think about it while you guys are telling me yours.
Ooh.
Oh, now, okay, Vanessa, you go.
Oh, okay. I'm like horrible at this, and I should be better. Okay, I'm gonna say Six of Crows, which I'm excited that Six of Crows, which is a part of the Grisham trilogy by Leigh Bardugo, which is turning into a Netflix show this year, Shadow and Bone, and I love the Inej, I think that's the way you say her name, and she is this girl that grew up in a circus family, and she was taken and she was put into a brothel, and then she ends up becoming like a thief or looking for secrets for this particular gang, the Six of Crows, and she's such a badass, and she's not apologetic about who she is, and she's great with weapons, and you can't girls slinging some like daggers. What can you ask what more can you ask for? And I'm excited to see it as a live adaptation this year on Netflix.
That is awesome. So there's a couple, but I thoroughly enjoyed Ender from Ender's Game. That was, I think, actually a really complex character. And I loved the story arc that went with them. And then one of my favorite series of all time is I'm Not a Serial Killer. It's the beginning book of the Dan Wells series. And his lead character is named John. And he knows he's a psychopath, knows that there's something wrong with him. And he really kind of approaches how he sets rules for himself and stuff like that. And then there is a book series called Zoe Bentley. And the lead character, Zoe, works for the FBI as a criminologist, but she can not a criminologist, that's not the right word for it. She does crime scene investigation, but she can put pictures down and she can see how the scene happened. And unfortunately, it's not a great thing for her either. She can play it out. Those are three of my favorite characters, mainly all horror characters, but there we go.
God, I feel like I should throw one more out there. I'll throw one more out. I was thinking of Darrow from the Red Rising series by Pierce Brown. It's a science fiction adult series, and it's this guy who the world's set up as a caste system by color, and he's the lowest, which is red, and how he basically a tragic event happens to him where he wants to take revenge on the gold, which the gold is at the top of the caste system. And it's basically, if you love these very Roman Greek tragedies, and it's just got a lot of epic adventure and fighting, and it's a very I think he's a brilliant writer. And so Darrow, you can't help but feel bad for him. He goes through a lot of ups and downs, so he's probably one of my other favorite characters.
Okay, now it's you, Wendy. Listen, we gave you a lot of airtime to think about it there, dude.
I know.
Lots of airtime.
I was thinking.
With beer. I was thinking with beer.
I don't know if this is my favorite character, but one of the most interesting characters is from the Rebecca Du Maurier story, Rebecca, which they did just do a remake for Netflix, which I didn't care for. The remake. It was fine, but it wasn't. You can't compare it to the original. In the story, the narrator, similarly to Fleabag, if you've ever seen Fleabag,
I love Fleabag.
she has no name. So I think that's really interesting. Those are the only two stories that I've come across where the main character
Fight Club.
is an unreliable narrator, but also has no name.
Yep.
And so that's really interesting to me.
Fight Club, that's exactly what it is. The lead character in Fight Club doesn't have a name. He refers to himself like Jax blah, 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 but he doesn't actually have a name.
Yeah.
His alter ego does, which is Tyler Durden. And his writing is pretty amazing. That's a very good book to movie too, was Fight Club.
Mhm.
I didn't realize he didn't call himself a name.
I always assumed it was Jack, but I didn't read the story, so.
No, he doesn't say the
No.
name once in the entire book.
Now that you mention it, you're right.
He refers to himself and he refers to everybody around him, but when he's like, I am Jack's angry pancreas. Like but he's not, he doesn't refer to himself by name.
Mhm.
And even his bosses don't refer to him by name.
Yeah.
Like, nobody calls him a name.
And also an unreliable narrator. So.
And so it really does. No, exactly. It makes that moment when the guy, in the bar is like, is this a trick question?
Mhm.
And he's like, yeah, Tyler Durden. And then he's like, we've just lost Captain Pritchard. It happens in the book where he realizes he doesn't have an identity. Layers in the book. Okay, Wendy, what as a writer are you terrible at?
Well, we've already discussed doing romantic scenes that are not closed door. So just like as far as writing intimate scenes as a romance writer, I feel like I'm always like, his hand touched her butt. Like it doesn't, I'm working on it, but it just doesn't flow naturally for me. I'm also learning that I'm not as good of a writer grammatically as I always thought I was. Like I like to use my justs. I don't want to get rid of my justs. I the way that I write some things are actually like UK English and not US English. Like I'm very proper for some reason. The whole I use unnecessary commas just for emphasis. So I think I've learned that I'm not as good of a writer as I thought I was.
I don't think that I'm not as good of a writer. I think we all have, every writer that we talk to has different things they do. And whether it's the same things they do over and over again, or every time they write a story, they invent new things they do terribly wrong. I think that it's something you have to keep honing the practice of. And I don't think there are people that are good enough writers that you can do line edits and be done. And then there are people that basically hand in a big steaming pile of shit and their editor has to make it into some, beautiful gold palace because, as Vanessa's shaking her head, yes, and only those watching this via video could see that. But there are some others, and there are some that don't want to get better and want to be whatever they think their authentic selves are, and that's super fucking irritating for any editor.
No, that's what's so embarrassing for me is like, oh my gosh, have I been making all this unnecessary work for my editors? So it is one of the reasons why I strive to get better. And if you're not striving to get better, then why are you writing?
Bless you, child, because that is a wonderful thing to hear, because the thing that I see a lot of the times is people are like, well, I don't need to try so hard. I just need to finish it. My editor is going to fix everything. And especially when you're in a situation like, for instance, in your, Wendy, that you are on a time crunch, you can't afford to just give this steaming pile of garbage because you are on a time, and that means you're putting more work on your editor. And even as an editor myself, like I never want to feel like I've peaked. I've always want to feel like I'm a constant student in writing because I want to be better. I don't want to have to always rely on someone to fix all my stuff, because when someone else has to go in and look at my stuff objectively, I want them to be able to go deeper than I could have, more than I could have, because I can only go so far because it's my story. But the more stuff that you give your editor to fix, like commas or like wordiness, then they're not able to go in and give you that really, really in-depth critical analysis of your story. Meaning, are you hitting the emotional beats correctly? Are you developing this character the right way? And so I think that's great that you have that attitude, because most people don't. They're like, oh well, my editor will just fix it and that'll be the end of it.
I agree. No, I agree. And editing is such an important task. Okay. Well, we have run out of time on our literary brief, but look at all the rapid fire questions I did, Vanessa. I thought you'd be.
I'm so proud of you.
Wendy, you have been thoroughly amazing. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you both. It's super fun.
Okay, so you have to again tell everybody how to find your amazing work.
Well, I'm available. Most of my catalog is available at scribd.com. You can probably get a free trial, 30 days, I think, from there if you're not already a member. And you can listen to all my audiobooks and read all my ebooks for free. I'm also available on Amazon, Kobo, Google Play, and Barnes & Noble.
Google, and you have, what is your website?
It is my name, my very long, very consonant-filled name, wendydalrymple.com.
Do you want to spell Dalrymple for those sitting there going, what the heck?
Wendy, WENDYDALRYMPLE.com. And if you go and you sign up for my newsletter, you will get a free download of my novella Tamsin's Hollow.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here. You've been wonderful.
Thank you all.
Absolutely. Okay, this has been Drinking with Authors Literary Briefs. I'm Erica Lance.
I'm Vanessa Valiente.
And we will see you next time.